Hey everyone, welcome to the Cutting Edge podcast where culture meets crypto. Today we have the co-founder of Universe.XYZ. He has an impressive entrepreneurial track record by co-founding BarnBridge and Proof Systems, one of the largest marketing and UI UX companies specializing in digital assets. His journey began in 2016 working with ConsenSys, Earn.com, which was acquired by Coinbase, and Near Protocol, just to name a few. Please welcome Tyler Ward. Hey, Tyler, what's going on? How are you?
How's it going? I'm excited to be on here.
I know it's exciting to have you. Full disclosure, I invested in the seed round, and I kind of wanna. I think that that's like a really good story for like the genesis of the project because it didn't start off as Universe, right? Because like I remember, I was introduced to you by Santiago, and he was like, "Oh, you need to talk to this guy. He's really smart." And I just kind of like aped in, right? And I just that's really how our relationship started. So why don't you, I guess, kind of talk a little bit about the genesis of Universe before we get into like your greater background?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially because Universe was a little bit of like a culmination of like a lot of different things that had to do with like both my background as well as like my partner Troy and even Tim, like who I think more people in the NFT industry know as like Illustrator.
Mhm.
Like I knew him through BarnBridge, and ironically, when we were starting BarnBridge, since it was the first like DAO first organization, um, basically we had like a launch DAO on Aragon, and uh, that was just basically how we were like managing. I guess like most projects would have had like a multi-sig at that point, but we went a step further and actually set up a DAO, and we were basically memorializing on chain like Tyler Ward gives X amount to the BarnBridge DAO, and like this is what he gets out of it. So like we had some categorization of like on chain. Um, I mean, like it was kind of just us. It was just like a way to track everything,
Mhm.
and somehow I don't know who found it because like we weren't really advertising it, but like we got one in one day that just said like Tim Kang sends 10,000 USDC to the BarnBridge DAO. And like I don't even know how like Tim found this or how he like gave money to it, but naturally we were like, oh, well, like the seed round's closed, so we have to like send them the money back. But I remember thinking in my head like this guy's either like super excited about what we're doing or he just does not care about $10,000 just to send it to some random place. But so it was a mixture of both, I think, because Tim's done like well for himself. But I just naturally was like, all right, if this guy likes our project this much, like I really want to talk to him. And so I stayed in touch with him, and him and Jimmy were the first people that I reached out to when Universe kind of kicked off. And for the most part, Universe, I started on accident. Like we had these ideas and things that we were working on at the time that we wanted to like build towards. But the whole genesis of Universe was I just got like, I don't remember if it was 2 ETH or 4 ETH, but I got a bunch of people to send like 2 or 4 ETH into a multi sig. And where you have like a crypto punk as your head right now. Basically, I wanted to make like pixelated crypto art versions of like that would look like punks that were versions of Pepe. And even that was like an accident because really I just wanted one for like myself, for my own. Like at the time I had like 20 punks. And so I wanted like a frog version of a punk. And so when I think my designer like didn't understand the directions properly. So he sent me all these versions of these like crypto frog punk looking things. And so naturally I was just like, all right, well, now that I see this, I can't like unsee all these things next to each other. So I hit up like Jimmy and Tim and some other people, and we decided to just get a bunch of people involved and start doing it. And honestly, that was like right after hash masks. And I think in some ways us and hash masks like what became known as non-fungible Pepes, uh, that probably kicked off the whole profile picture movement, because like punks were already like, I mean, they were already a thing, but they were a thing for years. And like when Hashmask came on the scene and people started making them their profile pictures, really it was, I think it was probably non-fungible Pepes that paved the way a little bit for things like Bored Ape, because I mean, we just got so much like media attention. Like it was in like the Wall Street Journal and like Vice magazine. And long story short is we sold like millions of dollars worth of these non-fungible Pepes. And it was, I mean, it was one of the most like fun times I've ever had in my life, but it was also extremely chaotic because like it wasn't really like planned. Like this all happened like soup to nuts within like a week. And then I found out that Pepe actually had a founder, and it wasn't just like an internet meme. Someone actually owned it. So he was kind of threatening to sue me. And we hired all these really good like IP attorneys and stuff from like Apple. And they told me that I could fight it and that I had like a really good case of it being like derivative artwork. But I didn't want to like rip off Matt Fury. Like the whole reason we did it was just kind of to have fun. Like I wasn't really trying to like rip off an artist's art. So I just swallowed the hard pill to swallow and returned everybody's money. And then I basically had this like massive, like we had 6,000 followers on Twitter. There were like 5,000 people in our Discord, and people that were like whitelisted. And so I kind of felt bad because all these people wanted this to be something more than what it was. And I kind of canceled the project and sent everybody's capital back. So we didn't have any money left over. And so I
So
decided.
I wanna pause you right there for a second because
Yeah.
it was during those, because it was almost like I think it was like a 1 week auction, right? Where I think you were selling like maybe let's say 10 Pepes every night for like a week or two or something, right? And I remember Santiago told me about it, and I was like, he's like, I don't know what he's gonna do, but he's a really smart guy, and I'm sure it'll be something awesome. Like, say no more. And I just started buying a bunch of them. And I remember when you sent them back, and I was like, man, I really want to keep. And I forgot how many I bought. I maybe bought like 3 or 4 of them. And I remember thinking like, I want to keep one of these, and just like eat the cost, right? But I think something with the legality, if you didn't get all of them back or something like that. But yeah, I specifically remember this part because I joined the Telegram, and then I remember being in the Discord, and like that Discord was fucking nuts, right? Like the memes, especially during the actual sales, as the auctions were closing every night. I just remember being like, just it was fun, and like who was it? Homer Shilson, like that was like my favorite name that I found in that Discord, and I think I ended up following them because they post some funny stuff. But yeah, I to your point, it's like I do remember that time, and how crazy it was in the Discord while those auctions were going on.
You know, something that's crazy about that I saw the other day, because I made some type of statement recently that was like, you know, like I think that like non-fungible like Pepe's help like kick off like the profile picture movement. And someone like called me out being like, I've never even like heard of those things. And I went on OpenSea and looked at like the all-time volume, and this was a couple months ago. So like this probably has changed since then. But it was like even as of probably like October or November, it was still a top 100 all-time NFT project in terms of like secondary volume. Like now I think it's dropped out of like the top 200, but like it really was only on for like 3 days, and we were going to make I think 1,069 of the Pepes just as a joke, and we ended up only making 94 of them. but we were like making them in real time. Like we were getting like the art done as we were auctioning it. And I mean, that's a big, I actually think that you and me also met before that because of BarnBridge. And I know that you had been involved in like Yearn. And I don't
Mhm.
know if Pleaser happened before or after that, but I think we actually met in like, actually, I don't know. Maybe we met
I
afterwards.
I think it was we met. I believe it was through non-fungible Pepe, and then we started talking about Barn Bridge, and we started talking about all the other stuff you were working on as well.
Somebody
I'm pretty
still
sure
has
that's
one
what
of these things though. Like, and actually Homer Shilson of everyone in I don't know that entire thing. I think like he probably
I.
saw the biggest run up from NFTs just from like, I mean, you did because I mean, you definitely built a whole brand and identity around it. But in terms of just like Homer Shilson has like the rarest of all of the fluffs that he just got on Pac-Man luck. So like,
Right.
I think some of those people, I think for a lot of people, that was like an entry to what NFTs could be. I've tried to reach out to
Yeah.
Matt Fury and see if he would like pick it up and continue it. But I mean, because since then he's reached out and kind of said like, "Hey, I didn't actually like." When I watched the video about Matt Fury, like it seems like he dealt with a lot of crypto people that probably put a bad taste in his mouth. And then I think after Pegs, he just kept hearing about me and like did research. And I think once he realized like we weren't actually like a group of scammers, we were just like trying to have fun and still pushed everything along. He did end up reaching out to me, and then I reached out to him and asked him if we could finish the non-fungible Pepe thing, but he never responded. So one day I'm gonna have to try to get him to like bring it back. Because I think even
I
today,
mean,
if they launched it, I think it would be a top 10 project.
I really enjoyed it. You know, like yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that it was a lot of fun as it was happening, and it felt really magical. And it was sad that it got nipped in the bud really before it even really took off. But yeah, I mean I feel like that's like a pretty good piece of NFT history that probably not many people new to the space know about. So I think that that was pretty cool. But yeah, so that ultimately led to Universe being founded, right? So what I guess once you squashed that project, what ended up? How did Universe end up getting formed?
So we had the basis for an entire like community. And I was actually even talking to like the Yam kids when all this happened. And like, I know like Yam isn't still a thing, but like, I have a lot of respect for, I, I want to say their names are like Trent and Brett or Brent and whatever. Their
Will?
real names aren't super important for this, but I always really respected like how even though they had like a quote unquote like failed project, just because like I mean they were doing something ambitious. They were like one of the first like algorithmic stable coins that came out via yield farming. So like kind of like an ample forth that rolled out. Like I never had any Yam. I just in spite of them doing something highly experimental and it not going properly out of the gate, I think that they handled that like pretty graciously. And so when all this was happening, they kind of reached out and were like, "Hey man, just like take it from us. Like when it comes to like Yam, like the community is everything. Like even though you can't make Pepes anymore, like you can still do something with that community." And like they clearly like want to be a part of this community and they like want you and like your team to like lead them. So I would just keep like going at it. Like it seems like you struck something cool, and it sucks about the whole Matt Fury situation, but like just keep pushing it forward. And I kind of inherently already knew that like I mean there were just everyone from you and Santiago, and we got like a lot of traditional, like not even DeFi type investors involved, like True Ventures and Kevin Rose, and just like the quality of people, like the Mike Dudas's of the world, like it kind of compounded where we just had all of these people that were around the project, like all of those DJs, all of the musicians. Like I didn't even know who Dylan Rose or Dylan Francis was when he was in there, because I don't really listen to electronic music. And then I became friends with all these people. Like I knew who Diplo was, and like I now know who like Boys Noise and Disclosure are, because like I my wife listens to their music, and I'm like, oh yeah, like we played this at our wedding. But like to me, they were just a bunch of names and DJs. And I think in some ways that may have been like why they liked me, is because I was pretty unassuming to like, I don't know, like how famous some of those people actually are, just because I'm not really into that like LA, like Hollywood lifestyle stuff or like name dropping people. But I knew that there was like a very like strong brain trust of people. And so through that whole process of minting the Pepes, like auctioning them on OpenSea, getting everything to like show up properly, rendering all of the art, writing like custom mining contracts or minting contracts, like all of that stuff was way, way, way harder than it actually needed to be. And like I'm extremely technologically savvy. And like Tim, who I got involved, like he actually wrote the code on all of these contracts. And I was like, if me and Tim feel like Dumb and Dumber through this process, like the average person like has no idea like what they're actually going to be doing. And so the other part that concerned me is like, okay, like this is getting into a little bit of like a diatribe, so I'll try to keep it like short. But I think when we look back on like um, DeFi in between like 2017 and 2019, when it kind of came into like the mainstream of at least like crypto Twitter, I think when you like look back, hindsight's 2020. So like retroactively looking, like it's obvious to us why DeFi and like MakerDAO won out in the beginning. It's like these large banks can't keep printing money forever. We're eventually going to hit like a wall as a society. And most of us that are in crypto got into crypto in some way or form around that like idea. Like we're either old finance people that were in some type of investment area. We were in VC and tech. We were traders of some type. And so like it's kind of like retroactively looking inevitable that like DeFi was going to be the first killer use case of crypto. And I fell into NFTs somewhat accidentally through DeFi, where our like BarnBridge products actually minted NFTs more as a technology, not as like an art.
Right.
So like as soon as
Well,
you
yeah, yeah. I wanted to get into that, right? Because I got into like the art side of NFTs, but part of why I liked it so much, right? Because was I also saw the financial use case of it, right? Where it's like a bond is an NFT, a stock is an NFT, a mortgage is an NFT, right? And it's funny because you also inherently understood that, and that's how like you came in through NFTs through DeFi, right? So I'd love for you to kind of talk about that a little bit about like what you were doing at BarnBridge even before you really like degened into the NFT space, right? And I remember you telling me when we first met that you owned a bunch of punks, right? And you had to sell the punks to fund BarnBridge, right? If I remember correctly. And you know what that was like. So it's not like you just came in and you were like, oh, like NFTs, cool. Like let's make some NFTs. Like you really inherently understood the tech, like really early on.
uh, I got lucky where BarnBridge had really good devs that were looking into, like even back in the ConsenSys days, we would talk about the things that you could do with NFTs. And so BarnBridge was like the first major DeFi protocol that like released something that had like a strike price, a maturity, something that made it not like fully fungible or like one to one with something else. Like an Apple Class A stock is pretty fungible to other Apple Class A
Mm.
stocks. And then you have like currencies, which like a dollar is a dollar. I mean, you can rip a dollar in half and tape it together and your bank's probably going to take it. Like that's the epitome of like fungible. and or just like pure commodity like gold, right? Like, I mean, if you have a brick of gold, it doesn't matter where it originated from. It matters whether it's actually gold. And so that's basically everything that isn't those three things, either like a class A type equity, a commodity, or a currency. Like everything else is going to be categorized as NFTs. And I realized that back in, I mean, now people say OG when it comes to like NFTs, and it really just means like I was involved in 2020. But my like punk bags were already up like a lot. Like, I mean, I bought a bunch of punks at like $100. And it was because I went into the Larva Labs Discord and I was trying to see like what types of DeFi products you could build with NFTs. And so I just randomly found the Larva Labs Discord. Jimmy was just hanging out in there, like preaching the gospel of what like NFTs were going to be. I mean, it was literally just like Jimmy's team, like him, Nate, this guy, Cliff. They were like I don't even know like where the Larva Labs like founders were. Like it was just them hanging out in there talking to people about NFTs. And so, yeah, I slowly sold all my punks by the time they hit like 200 grand. And I honestly should have kept one of them, but the one that I wanted the most, I accidentally listed on accident on Larva Labs using their like, it's not like a marketplace. It's just like their listings feature. And that was another thing where I was like, I mean, we need better tech here. Cause like I rugged myself. Like I sold a punk for like half an ETH when they were already like 5 ETH. And that was like the one that I actually wanted to keep. But one day I'll buy a punk back. But yeah, that's basically, I went to NFTs for the financial technology side of it. I stayed for the art and culture because like you could tell there was something there. Like it was like bubbling up to the surface the way DeFi was, where like basically DeFi started to feel extremely relevant when like Maker hit like $100 million in TVL and like Uniswap had just like done around like $3 or $5 million of trades. I remember I went out to New York and ConsenSys, the company, was putting on an event, and I went and listened to Hayden from Uniswap talk, and everybody else in there were bankers, and they were just like, I have no idea what this guy's talking about. And I'm sitting there like just nerding out that he somehow executed a trade without like a centralized order book. And I could tell it felt like it was getting real. It was like MakerDAO took them 10 months to hit 100 million in TVL. It took, or 7 months. It took Lending Tree like 7 years. And so NFTs felt the same to me. It felt like this like weird esoteric niche of the internet where these people were just extremely passionate and like no one else in the world knew what they were talking about. And really that to me that was another reason I got really high into gaming, was because in the same way, like right around when like Non-Fungible Pepe was happening, that's when like Kieran from Alluvium was doing the pre-seed round for NFTs. And I guess like because of Pepe, like people all of a sudden knew me as this like NFT expert. And so, yeah, like basically I was kind of like blessed when I came in on like how it all rolled out. Just cause I felt like we were probably 3 to 6 months ahead of the market. And then the market just like absolutely exploded. But to bring this all full circle, when I was saying before that you could tell that DeFi, like retroactively looking, was going to be a thing, the one thesis that I built about NFTs, going back like from when we decided what to build, was it scared me that, not to say anything bad about OpenSea, because like they're an industry leader and I don't want anyone to like think that like I'm saying anything bad about OpenSea. They help build this industry as much as anyone else. But it scared me that there was a centralized company that was pretty much like the entire marketplace of this thing that we were passionate about. And the bigger component is I think we're going to look back at NFTs 5 years from now the same way that we are with DeFi, and saying like, oh, well, of course it feels inevitable. And I'm not sure it's the art component necessarily as it is the free speech and anti-censorship part. Like if you think about when Pepe, like even what Pepe came to mean where I was trying to say, let's take this back from the racists and make Pepe ours. Like there was a lot of like canceling people on the internet. I mean, that was during a presidential election. Like regardless of whether you agree with Donald Trump or don't, like they took a presidential candidate, an acting president, like off the internet. And I remember at the time thinking, I mean, if they can do that to the president, they can do that to anyone. And that scared me. So like the bigger part of NFTs that I probably got excited about even more so than the art and the technological components of them or the gaming aspects, it was 100% the immutability aspect. Like you cannot censor
Mhm.
or take away. And then even like in your case, like it allowed you to almost put on like a mask of anonymity that you were able to build a brand around like your actual ideas. So like
Right.
it basically people will say all these bad things about NFTs and the environment and whether they create equality, but it's like I'm literally talking I mean, I've met you in person, but like that wasn't a prerequisite for me to come on here. Like I could be talking to literally a pixelated cartoon picture where I don't know what color you are, where you came from, like really anything about you. And there's a part of that that is extremely powerful. So like on one end, it's like you are anonymous. So like uh, there's like aspects of that where you're allowed to like almost distance yourself from an idea while you test an idea out and kind of play around with it, which is very important for like the foundation of society and free speech, that we aren't just automatically persecuted or crucified for like asking questions or trying to come up with some type of an idea. Like thought crimes should not exist like in today's day and age. And unfortunately with the internet, it makes them really easy to go after. But the flip side of that really is this like immutability and inability to take it down.
Right.
I just think when it came out in the world and people write like history books on NFTs, it's not going to be lost like that was like the fertile ground and setting that they showed up.
Right. Yeah. And I think we totally agree on that, right? Because to me, I like you, just like myself, firmly believe that cryptocurrency technology, like blockchain tech, is really what's needed for like freedom, right? Like throughout, like no matter who you are as a human. And the reason why I've delved so deep into NFT is because I firmly believe that that's the Trojan horse that takes crypto mainstream, right? Because like the first time I used DeFi, I was like, holy shit, like this is going to change the world. The problem is, right, like at the moment, at the time in 2020, 2019, 2020, not many people use DeFi, right? And it's like it was very crypto native people that used it. So it's like, how do you evangelize this tech and get it out to the masses, right? So that people, because not everybody wants to play a money game, right? Like I come from finance, I traded, but I have plenty of people really, really smart, very, very successful. They don't necessarily care what the price of Apple stock does on a day to day basis. And that's fine, right? Like that, and we need people in various different industries. So like to me, when I realized what NFTs were, just like you, right? It's like, you see all these things happening around the world, right? Like to me, I think one of the scariest things I've seen in the last 6 months was the people that donated to the Canadian trucker strike, uh, getting the possibility of their accounts getting shut off, right? And that's you're talking about a top 10 democracy around the world that's in Canada. That's not like in communist China or Russia where you would expect something like that to happen. So to me, that just pushes that narrative even more, is like, how important is this technology, right? And just even using, the invasion of Ukraine as an example, I have friends that live in the Ukraine that I was able to send them some crypto instantaneously so that they had some money to kind of pay for things and get out of there and like, cross the border or whatever. That, as soon as the invasion happened, like banks are done, right? And, if you wanted to help somebody, you wouldn't be able to help them. And to me, that's the important part of all of this, right? Is like the culture is great and like I love it, and I think that that's really how we go mainstream. But the real value prop here is the technology of what NFTs and crypto in general enable for humanity, right?
I yeah, I agree. Like I couldn't agree more. And I guess one thing that like kind of scares me at this point is like how fast it accelerated. Like, I mean, I literally started this whole thing with Pepe being like, we're going to take Pepe back from the racists. Like, I don't like that it was used by like nefarious groups in like the wrong way. It's not my art. Like, I kind of thought it was like ours is the internet's. And so like that was how we started it. And like I really wasn't even thinking about like the presidential election or anything like that at the time. Cause like I'm just not that like political in order to like care that much. So it's not like I did this as some sort of like political statement. But one thing I will say is that I've been like almost blown away with like a lot of like the tinfoil hat feeling like why we own Bitcoin and Ethereum and why we needed to get all this stuff permissionless. Like it's not just the truckers group. It even was like I mean, I saw videos in Australia of like them showing up at people's houses like with arrest warrants saying like that like, oh, you said something about like the vaccine or COVID on Facebook. And like these people are getting like arrested. Like it's like a just normal looking lady. I'm like, this is not okay. And like that stuff, if that's happening in a top 10 democracy, like you're saying, like how are these technologies getting utilized in far worse areas? Like how many of my friends like Bantag, like he's clearly must have been in Russia or some area over there because he fled as soon as that happened. Like the anonymity of these profile pictures and NFTs provided a mask to far more people than like people like you and me that have like the blessing of living in like America. I think that this is going to become an increasingly international movement. And I think NFTs in a weird way are going to shield people like me, where I don't know how many people care about finance, much less like software. Like if you talk to the average person at Walmart and try to explain to them what BarnBridge does, like, I mean, most of America doesn't even have savings, much less like how we manage those savings accounts. So like I'm somewhere of like could be like painted as a Bond villain between like a crypto Silicon Valley like tech nerd mixed with like a Wall Street. Like nobody's crying like if I get locked up due to any censorship and saying these DeFi protocols are a form of free speech. However, the NFTs is a whole nother story. Like once we brought art into the lexicon, and I think we very much forced world governments to pay attention to crypto. And I mean, they're going to have to build real regulations. They can't hide from it anymore. Because if you throw someone like me in jail for these thought crimes because of whatever reason, like I don't know how many people are going to shed a tear for the BarnBridge version of Tyler Ward, but the version that created an art marketplace and was pushing forward art and gaming and culture and like and all of the music components of things, like that is where you start to look like Castro. I mean, that's what Castro did, is he killed all the artists, right? So like I think in a lot of ways, as much as it sounds like blowing steam or making ourselves feel more important than we are, I think NFTs are a very welcome and needed shield for digital assets and the development of digital assets, where I mean, a lot of us are creating cool art at this point, and you can't just shut that down because there are speculators in the room. You can't tell Pablo Picasso he can't paint anymore because people think that his art's worth money, right? So like I think there is a lot of fraud and bad things that happen in this industry that need to get cleaned up, but they can't go off these like kind of loose based ideological kind of very old versions of things to try to like hit the industry with like a gotcha. And I don't think people respect NFTs for that aspect of them. Is like they did go mainstream. Like Odell Beckham Jr., when he took off his jersey at the Super Bowl, had a punk shirt on, right? Like, I mean, Justin Bieber's Twitter picture is a Bored Ape.
Bored
like,
Ape. Yeah.
One thing I do want to say is no one should listen to Jimmy when it comes to Bored Apes, because when those things blew up and Universe and Pepe were happening, Gold Apes were like 15 ETH, and I messaged him and I was like, "Hey man, these Bored Apes are really cool. I've been really busy with this Universe and Pepe thing. Should I get one of them?" And he's like, "Nah, man, I think you already missed the wave." Then he goes and sells a Gold Ape for 3.5, one of his two for $3.5 million. Not
Oh man,
not
that's hilarious.
everybody
I mean,
can be right.
Jimmy's amazing. I love Jimmy. One of the best podcasts I've heard ever on NFTs was his interview on Andrew Steinwald's Zima Red, which he was talking about a lot of the on-chain stuff way before before people even knew what NFTs were. So Jimmy's awesome. Just like you, and like I really love this conversation, even though we've strayed off topic a little bit, because I do think it's super important, right? Because again, I think the reason why you and I vibe so much is because we see the world very similarly, right? We don't have the exact same backgrounds, but we have similar backgrounds. We both understand financial markets. BarnBridge. For those that don't know, do you want to describe exactly what BarnBridge is, and then we'll start delving into Universe?
Yeah, and also just so anybody listens to this, I'm kidding about Jimmy. Like I have nothing but respect for that guy. Like nobody's right on everything, and that guy's been on the money. I mean, I'm in NFTs for a major part because of Jimmy. Because I mean, he worked at Google, so like when he was in there talking about NFTs, and then I just wanted to get on a call with him. He was the guy that really sold me on like on-chain metadata and provenance and like how important all of these things were. So like, I mean, I say on Twitter, like every 6 months, like we're all just disciples of Jimmy, like building the worldview that he saw before any of us knew what we knew what an NFT was. Like, I mean, I played with crypto kitties, but like until I met Jimmy, I didn't really care that much about him. But yeah, so BarnBridge is a complicated DeFi protocol. So like in DeFi, you like the winners. I saw someone say recently, like all the winners of DeFi have already been written. And I'm like, all right, like that's going to age as good as that. Like everything that has ever needed to get made in the world's already been made. I do agree that like the main primitives are there. Like you've got capital markets, you've got like areas you can swap in and out of these like digital assets. So like the bones and the framework of a functioning digital economy does already exist in DeFi, and it's interesting because that's not really how markets scale. And I've said this to a lot of DeFi founders that I don't think that DeFi paid enough attention to NFTs in 2021, and I don't think NFTs paid enough attention to DeFi. And I think NFTs didn't pay enough attention to DeFi because they were making so much money and DeFi was just down for most of the year. And I think a lot of DeFi people didn't pay attention to NFTs, except for people like, honestly, you and me, where we went and told a lot of other people about it. And I think the reason is because it's like almost like like they saw it as like lowbrow. Like it was like, well, I mean, I'm a like CFA level understander of like crypto, and that's why I'm in crypto. It's like we all like nobody took us seriously for so long that like the last thing we wanted our like Goldman Sachs buddies seeing is we're flipping like JPEGs of like pictures on the internet, right? Like, so I think there was a little bit of like, I don't know, like embarrassment where they didn't want to be a part of it. But I actually think that was a huge miss for the industry, was all the DeFi guys talking about NFTs almost like it was below them. And one, they missed out on a ton of money that they would have made otherwise, which is ultimately why a lot of people are in finance. And it felt a little more pure than some of like the DeFi hacks that were going on at the time. But the more important component was that actually was like the truest essence of what is coming to crypto one day, which is actual organic demand. So like right now, everything that we buy in DeFi is really just subsidizing traders and speculation. And we have this like random thing just show up out of nowhere called NFTs. And like people are spending $300,000 for a profile picture. And now maybe those things are overpriced, whatever. That's for other people to argue about in price. But there were people that wanted something that they couldn't afford and they had to save up in order to do it. And I don't think that as a DeFi industry, we did enough to actually support that, where like you have true organic demand show up, which is what's needed to have a functioning debt and lending and capital market in place. And yeah, ultimately, I think now people are starting to notice it. And I think that this like kind of in between uh, DeFi and NFTs, where like you show up somewhere, you want to play a game, but the player characters are too expensive, so you have to rent one or utilize it in some certain type of way. That's where all this is headed ultimately. Like,
Yeah.
because not everybody can afford, even a $10,000. Like nobody. That's like more than
Right.
an Xbox plus all the games that you have on it combined. But so you'll rent it in some capacity, right? Or it'll be like Aaron's
That,
AFA that they meant
yeah.
things. But getting back to
Yeah. That.
BarnBridge and where this fits, just to bring it full circle, is BarnBridge was the first instance in a major way. I mean, people had played with it before, but it was the first instance of true fixed income that existed in DeFi. So everything had these variable rates. And we treated it where like one side took like a more variable rate and one side locked in a fixed rate. Because when you're doing any type of financial planning or budgeting, whether it's for your house or a whole island like Puerto Rico, you need fixed payments because that's how you line up the cash flows and actually determine whether something's going to be bankrupt or not. Like you can't just be like, oh, we're just hoping USDC interest rates on Aave go to 90% tomorrow, and then we'll be able to build a model. So like all financial models of the old world are built off of fixed income, and BarnBridge did a lot of different things. I think going forward, it'll probably mostly focus on perfecting that fixed income component. And a big reason for that is because a lot of the NFT stuff that I've worked on has probably collectively surpassed BarnBridge just in terms of people knowing what it is. And a lot of just like even being able to rent things on InterDAO or like save up for an NFT on Universe, like the tech stack of the fixed income component of BarnBridge is probably more buildable as a money Lego than some of the like perps and options
Right.
components of like, we have two different products, which is kind of two different protocols. I think the one that'll stand the test of time will be, I mean, it's still one of the leading, if not like top three fixed income protocols in all of crypto.
Right. Yeah, no, and thank you for taking the time to explain that. To go back to what you were saying about, how DeFi missed NFTs and NFTs missed DeFi, I feel like, DeFi was born for me out of what ended up happening was in 2017, you had a lot of crypto rich people that then wanted to buy assets in the real world. And the banking system would be like, nope, we're not going to give it to you. We're not going to finance anything. We're not going to let you wire money in easily. You were going to make it as difficult as possible it is for you because you're operating outside of like the regulated system. And so you had a bunch of really, really smart people in crypto that were just like, all right, fuck it. We'll build our own financial system, right? And to me, that's what DeFi was, right? Literally
Yep.
just a bunch of really smart people that are like, if you're not going to lend to me, I'll find somebody that will on a platform that we build. And I think right now we're probably, and you've seen a lot of these projects because I know we've spoken about a lot of them over the last couple of months, where people are now building this infrastructure for NFTs, right? Where it's like, okay, great. I have an NFT portfolio. I want to take a loan against it. Currently there's not great infrastructure around it, but I know great infrastructure is coming, right? Oh, I want to rent it out. Currently there's no real good infrastructure around it, but that will be coming out, right? And then
Yep.
what does it look like when I rent out my asset and then I want to take out a loan against that income stream, right? And then all of a sudden, all this stuff starts really interconnecting, right? And then that's where, like, pretty much you get 1+1 = 5 because you have, these protocols on the DeFi side now integrating with NFTs, which are digital assets, and really allowing the consumer base within the crypto ecosystem to kind of self-finance itself and not have to be like, all right, well, of course we're going to lend against a crypto punk because it's $200,000, but we're not going to lend against, your NFT that's $50, right? Even though, it's all relative, right? Like the beautiful thing about tech is it scales down to the lowest levels as well as to the highest, right? So to me, like I that's what makes me so bullish on the space in general, right? And I think that's where like Universe starts to come in as well, right? Because you were talking about earlier how when you were building on OpenSea, you know, you're technologically savvy, Illustrator's technologically savvy, and you guys were having trouble with it. So then, you know, when you end up giving people back their money, that's where I guess Universe was born.
Yeah. And I think it's even more than that, where it's like, I, okay, so like what Universe became wasn't completely in my control because we rolled it out as a DAO. So like I wanted Universe to not necessarily be like an OpenSea killer. I think that that's just like what the internet ran away with it as. And like I can only like read so many tweets from reply guys being like, launch your fucking marketplace and stop tweeting before I'm like, all right, well, this is what people want. Like they clearly want the marketplace more than anything else I'm talking about. But like I really saw it as like, if you think, okay, so like there's this whole thing called the fat protocol thesis versus like the fat application or fat dApp thesis. And I'm not going to get into that on this call because like we could have a whole podcast just about that. So like people should just research that if they're interested in it. The concept is that applications historically, like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, were how value was like collected on the internet. Like it collected towards these applications because things like TCP and IP and like SMTP, like those were all like public goods, like that nobody like owned the internet. Well, in the newer world of Web3, we actually do have like ownership and say over these actual like protocol level functions. And like I mean, that was happening even before crypto. Like people act like, oh, like we just made this up. Like nobody ever knew that they needed to own that side of the internet, and they'll, you know, like make fun of us like it's a problem looking for a solution, but it's not. Because when Barack Obama was president, he went to the EU and was talking with I forget that thing that they say like they're trying to kick Putin off of. It's like
So the
not
Security Council, or no? The payment network.
it's no, it's like the
I'm
world
drawing a
government. Like what they have like the EU, and then they have like this like the
the UN Security
yeah,
Council.
the UN, sorry.
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
basically back when Obama was president, he was going to try to give the UN like somehow America, same reason as we get like +1 on the phone because we like invented the telephone. We have like some special rights that have to do with like DNS and IP and like the underlying fundamental technologies that make like when you type like www in. And so
Mm-hmm.
all of that the US governs, and he was actually trying to give it to the UN because like he thought that more like that it was almost too powerful, that America like had that ability and power. And I don't know where that ever ended, but like clearly world governments are thinking about this type of stuff. So like when people say like, oh, y'all are just crypto kids, like shut up, like nobody cares about this stuff, like, well, they do. We're just paying a little bit closer attention, I think, a lot of time. But
Right.
basically what I wanted, so this fat protocol thesis, if you think about OpenSea as both an application and a protocol, they're both closed source. So it's like a company that owns the application, and they have a protocol, which is like what you sign messages on when you basically go on OpenSea and like sell an NFT. Well, I really wanted to build like a ton of different decentralized tools that basically acted as like protocols or just like pass throughs, so that you didn't necessarily have to put like all the power of NFTs into OpenSea's hands. Because like as much as like OpenSea guys are good dudes, I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg was a nice guy when he started Facebook. Like it's just too much power to give to one group of people. And as an industry, that's something that we're fighting, is to make sure that like these are collectively owned, group owned protocols, and that like the people of the world have say in how these things get like how these things are ultimately governed. And so Universe in particular, and where all this fits in, is Universe basically just released a suite of various products. Like we have minting contracts. Tim's written far more advanced minting contracts that we're open sourcing. We released these things called polymorphs that at the time were probably, I mean, in some ways they still are the most like technologically advanced like NFTs that ever existed. And that really prompted like,
Let's talk about polymorphs for a second, right? Because I remember when they minted, I did not like the art, but I remember we met up for lunch in Puerto Rico, and you shilled me hard on them. And you were talking about the tech, and I'm like, okay, I get it. That makes sense to me. But I always know, like, people will always troll every once in a while about polymorphs. So let's talk about polymorphs for a second, the tech behind it. And I know it's not your main focus but I know it's almost like a proof of concept for Universe, right?
Yeah. Well, polymorphs almost serve more as a proof of concept for like what like AFA and like altered state machine and those like characters and the brains, as well as like the fluffs, like this concept of having like dynamic NFTs. And just for people not listening that don't know what Universe is, I should explain it. After the Pepe thing happened, where minting was hard, auctions were hard, the marketplace like took a pretty massive like cut of like I didn't even know to program in the royalties so I could get like paid off of the Pepe stuff. So like even if Pepe's had gotten as big as like Bored Ape Yacht Club, like we didn't even know to put the royalties like in there ultimately. So like I realized that we need like better systems for like I wasn't going to be the only person. Like there's artists all around the world that are way better artists than as we've seen with the polymorphs. Like I think the art's dope, but I've never bought an NFT because of the art, except for maybe when I buy a punk again, I'll get that because I like the art. And then like I've bought a couple 101s, but most of the NFTs I've collected have been what I thought that you could do with the technology. And so what Universe is where you have an application like OpenSea. There's also a protocol running it. We basically built a really, really, really strong protocol. And right now we're like getting nuked in the market or people are attacking us because they don't realize that our front end is basically powered by this extremely powerful like back end and protocol that other things are going to be able to plug into. So like you have this liquidity layer that all the NFTs get listed into. And then I can go talk to like Genie or Gem or Fractional and they want their own marketplace. Well, they can just take a finder's fee and then plug into Universe. So like it doesn't really matter what our front end looks like. It matters that you could run 80, 100, 200 front ends into Universe and it's going to function properly. And they have incentive for actually doing that. And same with like the minting contracts, same with the auctions contracts. Like you can run an auction on your site that uses Universe's infrastructure and you may have to pay some type of small fee, but you're actually going to end up making way more money than we do. So like ultimately we've built like a suite of products that and historically since these applications collected all the value because you couldn't own the protocols, now that you can own the protocols, if we get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of NFT marketplaces plugging and popping up everywhere, there's like a music marketplace, there's a this kind of marketplace. That's actually fine with us. Like where like Universe.XYZ one day will probably be like Ethereum.org where like you go there and like there ain't even a marketplace there because it powers all the other NFT marketplaces that are just plugging into the liquidity.
So that's amazing. I have so many questions. So one, I mean, it sounds like you're creating almost like this protocol layer, and I've been asking this for a lot of people, right? Is like basically you're providing liquidity that will then I will be able to create my white label marketplace on top of Universe to be like, hey, this is G Money's curated marketplace of, let's say I only want to showcase like punks and chromie squiggles and polymorphs, right? And it's like you can go to g.money/marketplace and buy those things, right? Meanwhile, all the liquidity will be on the Universe contract so that if somebody else wants to buy it through another marketplace, they can go through there. But it's kind of like me allowing to create some sort of curated experience on the front end.
Yep, 100%. So like in your scenario, like you can basically say, I only want to show these NFTs on my marketplace. Like I'm talking with like the Pleaser team. I'll probably just start building front end interfaces for like a whole bunch of groups. Like I could build one for gmoney, but like on your marketplace, you can gatekeep and be like, I want people to only see what I have for sale. But if someone updates the price of like a punk on gmoney's marketplace, it's also going to update on all the other marketplaces, because it's just going to ping into that liquidity layer and be like, this is the new price ultimately. Where like when you go to Universe, you can see all of your NFTs on your marketplace, plus all of the ones that ultimately are also on our marketplace. But if it's your IP, you actually can stop that. So you can have it where you ask us not to put it on Universe.XYZ, and we have to honor your IP rights. But where it's really powerful is no one can take it off the liquidity layer. So like there are going to be things that we take off of Universe's like front end. Like if we get DCMA'd, I saw that in my reply guides too. They were like, oh, if Universe is coming, we don't have to worry about this DCMA anymore. It's like, kind of, you still do, because like I'm not going to jail for y'all, and I'm not fighting like everybody's like legal battles. So going back to like the Pepe thing, like if we get DCMA'd and we just don't listen to it, they're just going to go DCMA like AWS, and like all the Universe gets taken down at the interface level. The protocol can't come down. So ultimately, where I said that those lawyers said that I could have fought Matt Fury, I decided not to. I thought it would be like kind of a scummy move to say we're doing this for artists around the world and anti-censorship, and I go rip some guy off. Like it just was a bad look. So, but if I had wanted to do that, I could have ultimately just said, all right, fine. Well, I'll just build my own front end and plug it into Universe, and anyone can run that front end pretty much anywhere in the world. So like Funks, like if Funks, when they got pulled off, they wanted to go just build their own marketplace. Like pretty much anyone in the world can build any type of marketplace that they want to. If it's on the Ethereum blockchain, we can't take it down. I mean, we have rules for what we'll show. Like there can't be anything in terms of like child pornography or DCMAing. And if people do those types of things, they're liable for running their own front ends. But liability between a DCMA and something far more nefarious that I mentioned, those are very different, right? Like you don't go to jail for ripping off like a picture of a Pepe frog on the internet, unless like you don't pay the bills or you just do something crazy, right? Like there are things that are just outright illegal that I wouldn't encourage anybody does. In terms of like free speech is a weapon that needs to be like yielded properly. But so long as like something is legal, that doesn't mean that I necessarily want to be liable for it by running my own front end and interface into it. But if you're really like old Tyler's really passionate about going to war with Matt Fury over this Pepe frog thing and keeping the project going, I could have had Universe existed at that point. That becomes a civil argument.
Right. No, and that's super interesting, right? Because I remember, I mean, and I think this was back when you were first starting to work on Universe, because you were talking about censorship, right? You were on a podcast. I forgot. It might have been Zima Red. And you were talking about censorship and how, basically, I'm going to butcher the argument, but maybe you pick it up. It's like basically, right? Like right now with like Facebook and Twitter and web, your classic Web 2s, right? Where censorship comes from like the top level, where we don't really know how censorship comes, but it's decided and there's really nothing you can do about it, right? But if let's say like on the protocol level, right? If let's say the community wants to censor, I don't know, some project because they deem it's racist or whatever, as long as the community votes for it and the community agrees with it, that's like a community decision, right? Like, and if you don't like that, you can go and start another community that kind of agrees with that decision, right? To me, that's like a very capitalistic take, right? It's like, I can be racist if I want and not allow people of a certain ethnicity into my store, right? If I'm a store owner, but ultimately, like, I suffer because I won't be as profitable, right? Most people will not operate in that. I'm really butchering the argument here, but like to the point where it's like the community decides, right? And so, like, to me, kind of like what I found really interesting about that argument that you were making is that ultimately it's a community owned project and it's the community that gets to vote, right? And that's really kind of where the power of decentralization comes in that everybody has a say, and it's not just like some dictator that you hope is benevolent and like really like aligns with the community over time.
100%. Like, because I'm not like the dictator of any of these protocols, like there, I mean, no one, I mean, someone could become the dictator, but they would need to buy that dictatorship basically. Like if someone ultimately
Right.
gets enough power or like votes, then I mean, we saw that with like Convex and Curve and the voting wars. I think what I was saying in that though is that we have like, I mean, that podcast I'm pretty sure was with Kevin Rose.
Yeah, it was with Kevin. Yep.
And so even on that thing, I kind of like name drop because I didn't know what I was getting into at the time. Like, and I just said Mindex, which that's like Julian Assange's uh like code name, like his hacker name, right? So I don't know if I like support Julian Assange. Like it's kind of like that free Ross thing. Like I don't really know the real story. I don't know what this guy did. Like I don't have any like I only know what like the news tells me, right? Like I don't personally know this person, but I do, it does bother me inherently that like Twitter and Reddit and these platforms, they ultimately are, I mean, they're kind of like thought police and they have to adhere to these like woke crowds of just like swarms of cancel culture that like a lot of times maybe these are conversations that we need to be having as a society and not just saying like, oh, this bothers me or this offends me, so I need to shut it off the internet. I mean, that's like where when free speech dies, like so does democracy. Cause like that's what Putin does is like he has a democracy via come in here and sign what I want you to sign, or these guys will shoot you. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess like I have the freedom to get shot or decide to do that, but like that's not what we mean by that word. And so like when we talk about like freedom of speech, like, yeah, we don't mean freedom of consequence, but somewhere in the lines, these massive oligarchical like tech organizations decided that they knew better than us what we should be consuming. And like, I don't think that anyone that is inherently American, because it's more than capitalistic, like it goes down to like the essence of like our philosophical being as Westerners is very much that of individualism. Like we believe that like I'm different than G because we're both individuals, and I'm proud of the ways that make me different than him. And I keep G Money around because he's different than me in a lot of ways and tells me to go buy all my punks back, and I don't listen to him. Like we're allowed to have these differing opinions. Eastern ideologies are not necessarily always like that. So they very much believe in the collectivist of the entire group. And like these are philosophical theories that go all the way back to like Aristotle, and there's Eastern philosophers that think these things. And so when you're talking about like individualism and anti-censorship and the ability to really like be ourselves, I think that that's something that's very inherently like American and like Western ideology, where like I want to be myself. Like I want to have a different Fortnite skin. Like I want to be able to like decorate the way that I am. And I don't want to get shut down doing that. And Eastern ideology does not do that in the same way. They think that if it's not good for the group, they do a lot of times. And I'm more specifically talking about China in case, someone from Thailand listens to this and says that I'm, saying that a whole side of the world is a different way than what it is. Like I'm no expert in this. I just know at a very high level, this concept between individualism and collectivism. And I think when you're looking at that more than even just a capitalistic perspective and even more of like a philosophical perspective, like I was working on anti-censorship going all the way back to like 2017 when I was working with like Aaron McDonald and the centrality team and Silo. And we we spend a lot of time thinking about like messaging apps and, you know, what a signal is a honeypot, and like, how do you prove that what you're running is truly the open source code, and getting away from all of like those super deep natures. I came across something on the internet that was called a panopticon, and someone's going to have to Google and fix me on that. But I can explain the theory and someone will find the word. It's this prison that was a circular round prison. And in the middle of the prison, they had this watchtower. And it was like a social experiment. And the concept ultimately came down to, if so long as someone just thought that there could be something in the watchtower, like just the fact that there could be a guard in the watchtower, that alone was enough to make it where the prisoners in that prison behaved the way that they were supposed to behave, because they always felt like they were being watched. So when people come out and say, like, I don't really care about privacy because like I'm not doing anything wrong, so why does it affect me? And I get that too, because like I can still look in the mirror after all this crypto stuff and say I never screwed someone over. I always tried my best to be ethical. But that is a problem. And the reason that the problem exists is that we do all inherently know that we're being watched. Like, we know that the US government said that it is monitoring us. We know that privacy is basically just a generalized concept that is how far away from your, you know, cell phone or your computer are you. And we don't like that, but it goes a lot deeper than that, where the essence of like human creativity, if we live in a society where we're collectivists and we ultimately aren't allowed to think individualistically and make mistakes and think different or say something or ask questions, a lot of ultimately, if Twitter existed in the 1700s, Galileo would have never asked if the earth was flat. And now we have to literally protect people on the internet for the freedom to say the earth is flat. But let's be honest, it's not flat, right? So like there's a kid like in a parallel universe somewhere in the world that lived in a society like this where everyone was watching and became too scared to even ask questions or question their reality or try to make their reality better in any way because they thought it would bother the state or bother the collective. And so instead of coming up with a concept like a cell phone, instead of coming up with a concept like an NFT, instead of coming up with anything that could have improved the world, they just stayed quiet and they shut up and they didn't say anything. And so this concept around anti-censorship has a lot more to do with just capitalism. It has to do with like human creativity and the true essence of like what we are as like individualistic Westerners, where like if Picasso had never asked the question, can a squiggly line be art? We wouldn't have modernism, or like our homes look different now because of Picasso. Like our cars look different because of Picasso. Like one human being just asking a simple question of like, can an abstract dot be an art? And then it goes everywhere from Hieronymus Bosch all the way down to these like enlightened, like mainly Dutch painters. And then somehow some Spanish guy makes Picasso his apprentice, and the whole world. I mean, Picasso's had more of an impact on people's lives and daily lives than I think anyone realizes. And it's because he just asked a simple question of like, what is art? Why can't this be art, right? He would have never asked that question if he lived in that panopticon. And that panopticon is where we're headed as a society. And I think we need to fight it, or, I mean, who cares about AI? Because we're just robots anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even, dude, I love the philosophy of this conversation because, like, you know, we're sitting here talking about a decentralized marketplace, and we pretty much the entire time we've been talking about censorship, right? And what crypto means and why this is important, which to me is ultimately the founding reason, the fundamental reason why we're here is because of censorship resistance, right? So, I really appreciate you kind of really going down the philosophical arguments for this, because a lot of times on the surface, right, people are just sitting there and like, all right, when number go up, right? Like, oh, this is great, this is revolutionary. Pump my bags, right? So I really appreciate having this conversation because I think it's really fundamental to the core values of crypto, right? And something as simple as like a decentralized marketplace and what that means for humanity in general as we live in a more digital age, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I know we're running over on time here. I want to be
I should
cognizant of it.
I should say one
Yeah,
thing about the polymorph since you asked about them, because people will get mad,
yeah,
is I literally swept the polymorphs floor this morning. Like we're doing so much stuff with them, it's crazy. So like we had to put the polymorphs on hold, and a lot of other things caught up, just because like we released that tech, it was open source. Everything Universe does is Creative Commons because it's a DAO, and a DAO can't really own any IP, at least like true IP, like legal IP. So we release everything. It's all open source. Anybody can use it and plug into. And so like a lot of projects did spin off of polymorphs, but we've secretly just been building stuff for months and not said anything. Like I'm building like an entire drop called deviants that are deviations of polymorphs. And I'm building something called the Metaversian Republic, that is ultimately like this entire like metaverse that you can go like walk around in and like shoot corn guns and like blow things up with the polymorphs. And so like we've like fully digitally mapped like the polymorphs where like they're fully 3D rendered and can walk around. Like we're releasing a bunch of like burn to mint technology that like you can like burn your polymorph to mint other types of like polymorphs or deviants or creatures or different types of art. And ultimately like I mean it's all coming. I mean we even built a game, like a battle game, a card game that is fully audited. We built it out. Like it's super rudimentary. Like if we released it 6 months ago, everybody would have thought it was crazy. But now it's like they just like kind of go up and fight each other, and it's like just a little animation. And then it, like by the time we release that, people are gonna be like, okay, cool, we have Alluvium. But the basis of all this stuff that we're building, like most video games are just inherently like super complicated card games. So like the everything we're going to be able to build on top of these polymorphs is crazy because we mapped out that entire genome where like we can change one of the genome slots just to be pretty much anything so long as we all vote on it. So like I always said, like I never have invested in like an NFT because of the art. I more did it for the technology. I think when we drop like the V2 of the polymorphs, like the 3D versions of them, all the deviants, I'm probably going to make an even bigger statement of like, not fuck your art, but like, let's see what this tech can actually do because we're about to show everybody.
right. No, I'm looking forward to it. Right, and to to kind of go down a little bit further because I know we're running close on
Yeah,
time
yeah,
here.
yeah.
I want to be cognizant of it, but with regards to the marketplace itself, right? So let's say I'm a creator, I'm releasing a collection, right? How simple is it to use? Like how plug and play is it, right? Do I need to get like a group of coders to help me, or is it really like plug and play and like how seamless is that process?
So right now it's kind of wonky, and like I'm not gonna sit here and like chill or lie. Like we built like a beta version of our marketplace because one, I understand smart contracts and front ends really well. I definitely bit off more than I could chew when like we were building this marketplace for like $10 million of monthly volume in NFTs. It goes to 10 billion. So we have to build this. Like I had to build like a, I'm not me, like our whole team had to build like a eBay level market, like something that could run eBay ultimately, right? And so like we have been working so hard getting the back end and the ability for everything to be able to just plug into all of these like microservices that I haven't had time to customize the front end experience, but it's coming. Like all the addition, like we didn't release any of the minting contracts that Tim coded. Like we haven't released like the auctions or the raffles or all the custom drop stuff because we just have to get the marketplace like stable. But all that stuff is already like done, audited, coded. So like all the front end stuff that we ultimately need to do is just going to iteratively come out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to pick a couple. I mean, I could even talk to you about it, G, is like, I'm going to build like 10 custom interfaces for like 10 projects. Like I'll probably do one for like the ETH lizards. I'll probably talk to the pleaser team, like fractional, even like gem, like where they would have their own marketplace that like plugs into Universe. Like we can do it with the fluffs, like just people who are kind of close to me already. And so we'll probably just do that, pay for it, document the ever living shit out of it. Because the way that you can kind of think about it is it'll be like Shopify in like the early days where like, yeah, you could get a website up. It was way easier. You didn't have to build all the payment rails and gateways, but it's not easy. Like you still need someone to help you. But then once
Right.
people did that for 2 years, like now you can click a couple buttons and have an e-commerce website like deployed on your own domain name on the internet. So like there's
Right.
going to be, I don't think it's going to take 2 years because we built the back end knowing what was coming. Like Shopify had to redo their, like I personally took Shopify's entire system down in direct to consumer one time because something hit the front page of Reddit. Like we don't have to, I mean, we have to worry about that, but we built it knowing that what we built was valuable and we knew that it needed to be scalable. So I'm still going to, I think everybody thought like we were going to release Universe and it was just going to be like the best thing since sliced bread and like no other marketplace would ever need to happen. But the way we designed the entire thing was to be more like Shopify than Amazon. And that naturally just took a lot of time. So like, I think people will look back a year from now and be like, we had no idea what those guys were actually building. But I think that that narrative will start to get sculpted. So like as of today, it's not that easy still. It's probably worse than the experience that I started with non-fungible Pepe. In 60 days, it'll be better than that experience. The next 60 days, it'll start getting really interesting.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, you actually, I seeded it. I think I've been farming since the beginning, but you're kind of like shilling me to want to kind of go in there and buy some more Universe tokens. So I'm really excited with what you guys are doing. Real quick, before I get you out of here, what's your favorite NFT?
Clown Charles Polymorph.
Okay. All right, cool. I love it. Love it. Living and dying by the polymorphs. I really appreciate it.
I mean,
And
honestly, my
also,
favorite
yeah.
NFT to not show one of a project that I'm with, like something that I'm just completely unattached to. Don't own any of them. I don't know the team, anything. I would say that the most technologically advanced NFT that isn't attached to like, I don't know what to call like the Universe Mafia, like everything that like fell out of Universe, like all the fluffs and ASM, like those are all my boys. We've been building together for years. So like anything outside of our eco, or mostly I just kind of buy all of our own shit. But I would say that those CyberKong things, like I keep getting blown. I might have to go buy a bunch of those things because every time I look at them, they're experimenting technologically. I've never met I don't even know anybody that owns a CyberKong. Like, hopefully that's not like a rug project or I'm shilling something. Like, I literally have seen this with nothing other than I see their stuff on Twitter and the stuff that they're building towards. And I can tell that that team seems to get the direction of where this industry is headed. And I would say that's probably my favorite project that I've never owned one, don't know much about it, and like don't really touch it. My favorite, like if I could own any NFT, I'd either want to own like a bunch of Clown Charles or a CryptoPunk.
Amazing. Awesome. And so then anybody that wants to keep up with you and what you're doing, where would you recommend they find you?
I'm kind of all over the place, like Twitter, join the discords of any of the projects. Like I try to go in at least like once a day. Like if someone really wanted to get in touch with me, I'm like pretty approachable. But yeah, I would say like Discord is the best place.
Okay, awesome.
Also,
All right.
I'm going to tell
Yeah.
you one thing before we get off. This will literally take 10 seconds. I'm going to tell you the
Tell me.
exact punk that is my favorite punk because it's
Okay.
one of the 6 attribute punks and I wanted to own it. And I used to check it every day when no one knew about NFTs. And the one day that they finally did it, it went on the market for $2.6 million. So it's Punk 5622. That was like my original NFT love. But unfortunately, it just never went for sale for less than $2.6 million.
Man, I mean, she's beautiful. I love her.
Yeah.
She's great. I'll put that in the show notes for anybody that wants to check up on it. But But yeah, Tyler, dude, always a pleasure. I love jamming with you. We always go down amazing conversations. So I appreciate you taking the time, explaining a lot about your philosophy. I think this is probably the most philosophical conversation I've had, especially when it comes to crypto and kind of why we're all here, right? And what NFTs mean in the broader scheme of things. So really looking forward to everything you guys are building and looking forward to chatting soon.
Nice. Yeah. And we can always grab a drink. It's always a pleasure, man.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.